TrevBeats show, TrevBeats show. Yeah. TrevBeats show, TrevBeats show.
Oh yeah, we live. We are live. Live. I just wanted to say what's up to everybody, and thanks for tuning in. Today on the TrevBeats show, we have a very, very, very good show. I just wanted to say also that all the guests that have been pulling up, and giving me interviews and stuff for the show, it's really been humbling. So thank you all for doing what you do. But anyway, welcome back to the TrevBeats show. I'm Trevor Lawrence Jr. and today we have a great show for you. We have a topic that every artist and producer and musician and creative, anybody in the business thinks about sooner or later. And that topic is longevity. It's not just how long you stay in the game, but it's how long you stay relevant, stay growing and stay healthy, creatively, mentally, and even financially. I don't need to tell you that this industry moves super fast. Like, technology's always changing. One moment everybody's chasing boom bap, the next moment everybody's on trap, the next is AI generating acapellas while someone's cooking their dinner. But the truth is, longevity comes from identity, from knowing who you are, even when the sound that's of the moment is not really your sound. It might take a minute for your sound to catch up, but longevity means you stay in the game long enough for that to happen. So today's guest is one of the greatest examples of this I know. You know what I mean? Adaptability, curiosity, musicianship, humanity, and the willingness to keep learning. That's how you make your career last, like my guest today, Mike Elizondo. He's worked with so many people I can't even, begin to name. And he never stopped being a musician first. He never stopped being a student. He never stopped being someone who treats people right. And in an industry that can burn people out as quick as a Spotify royalty payment, that's rare. So today we're talking about, how do you stay inspired? How do you reinvent yourself without losing yourself, pun intended? And how do you build a career that doesn't just last a long time, but gets better with time? My guest today, Mike Elizondo, has lived that. He survived every era of modern music industry, and he's thrived in all of them, from the analog rooms to the Dre days, to working with rock bands, to crafting pop and country hits, to producing CCM. He's done it all. And he's proof that longevity isn't luck. It's craft, it's humanity, it's community, it's knowing when to lead and when to listen. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with the legendary producer, songwriter, instrumentalist, best man at my wedding, and great friend, my guy, Mike Elizondo.
Let's talk about music. Ooh, let's talk about music.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, today we have a very special guest. I can't say enough about this guy. His musical contributions go from one side of the spectrum to the other. And you talk about longevity and versatility. This is just one of the greatest examples I've seen of that. So let's, without any further ado, bring in Mr. Mike Elizondo.
How you doing, Trevor?
Yo!
Oh! Okay.
Yeah, man.
This is some high production value right now. I love it.
Yeah, man. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah,
It's like,
congratulations, man.
oh, thank you.
This is a long time coming, man. I feel like your life has been heading towards this for a long time, man. Just
Yeah.
all the knowledge and all the things that you have to offer, man. This is great.
Well, thanks, man. It's fun. I'm enjoying doing it, and I'm reaching out to all my people, man, that really have been making a contribution to this industry that we all are in, man. So, I couldn't not have you on, bro, because to me, it's not that you're an unsung hero, but I know that, me knowing you personally, I know that your concern is not always being in front. I mean, you told me this a long time ago, Mike, and I don't know if you remember this. You said, Trev, I don't have the upfront gene. And I never forgot that, you know what I mean? And I just look at your work, and it's like the work says everything that needs to be said, bro. So basically, you've worked with everybody, from Dr. Dre to Fiona Apple. I'm going to keep going, man, because I need people to understand when I say depth, and I tried to go over a nice slice. So you've worked with Dr. Dre, and this is just a few. Dr. Dre, obviously, Fiona Apple, 21 Pilots, Avenged Sevenfold, Eminem, Alessia Cara, Lauren Daigle. It's like, how can you even be any more diverse than that? And you have stuff like Madison and all these other projects that are even more on these other spectrums, man. Like, how do you deal, what's your process for deciding the direction of a song or an artist's sound, because you're in so many different genres? So how do you know the thing to get them to?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Trev. I mean, yeah, I think I've as time has gone on, I've figured out a way to sort of trust my instincts. If I hear a song, even if it's someone's demo and it's just acoustic guitar and vocals, like, I think just all the years of me making music, me listening to music, it sort of like gets, some kind of thing happens in my head and in my heart and my gut where I feel like the song is kind of leading me, and the artist, discussions that I've had with the artist and what they're hoping to achieve artistically all kind of adds up to something. And I just try and go, okay, I get my first instinct and we start there. Maybe the artist says something and then that gets the ball rolling. And I don't always have to have all the answers right at the beginning. Sometimes it's just, what's that first step? And take that first step and try that. And then if that starts to get a reaction out of the artist and out of myself, then, okay, what's the next step? And we keep just adding to that. And then there are times where I hear a song and it's like, I immediately know, like, here's where we need to head and here's what we need to try. And then you just keep chiseling away at that until you get everybody on the same page at the end. But, it's different every time, and sometimes you start off in one direction and you realize, that's maybe not the most exciting. Let's pivot and try something else. So, it's just trying to take that first step. And then if that leads you to the right place, and just keep going until you end up at the finish line.
Well, I mean, the finish line always is the right thing, and I think that that's the thing that's amazing about an actual producer. I mean, a lot of people use the word. We've kind of seen the metamorphosis of that word go from what used to be considered a songwriter, then a programmer. And now people are kind of superimposing that word a lot, but there still are real producers. And it's like, to me, the producer is the guy that can take the song or idea, like you do so many times in a row, all the time, and take that idea and get it realized. You know what I mean? And it's the right thing for the music, for the genre, for the artist. And man, I mean, it's just an amazing track record of music that you've given us, man. You know what I mean? So,
Well,
yeah.
Thanks, Trev. I mean, yeah, I think I've been very blessed to have. I think initially as a bass player, I always tried to be as authentic as I could, and if I was playing a jazz gig on upright bass, to just try and sound authentic there. If I was playing some harder rock music, how do I get the right tones and make the right choices? and then that kind of evolved into as a songwriter, and then ultimately, I was put in position to play bass for some incredible producers. I mentioned Dr. Dre, T-Bone Burnett, Glenn Ballard, Matthew Wilder, Matt Wallace. There was a handful of incredible producers, and I got to sort of have a front row seat in watching how they conducted themselves with the artist, with the label, how they encouraged the artist, and how they encouraged the musicians that they might have hired. And I just tried to learn from them and figure out my own way of doing that, and encouraging whoever I was in a room with to just do their best, myself included. And I think I'm old enough that I was in those situations where I got to see producers in sort of an older fashion make these records, but also young enough to have been around some of the more modern techniques of record making and technology, and try to embrace all of it and not be judgmental towards any of it. Just try to be open-minded to all of it and incorporate it into a style that fits whatever's needed at any given moment. I think one of the things I try my best to do is to not have a sound, to not have a style that I enforce on an artist, and try and just take each artist as like, okay, I don't want to just get into a habit of doing the same things. And so I think a lot of times I try and purposefully look for artists where I'm not going to fall into that, where I'm going to be forced to try different things and try different techniques. And then it just keeps adding and adding to that experience. And, it's brought me to this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's very apparent when you hear the music, because it definitely all sounds like, you're really trying to push to get something. I think of when you first let me hear the Lake Street Dive album.
Oh, cool.
And it was like, man, it's such a departure from so much other stuff, but then everything sounds like that's your only thing. And that's the other thing. You say you don't have a sound, but everything you do sounds like this is all you do. And that's like a specialist thing, man. It's like amazing. So on that note, and you also mentioned, we'll talk about your career as a bass player as well. You contributed to so many iconic records. And just for the young people out there, the list is too crazy, but one that is in the last 25, 30 years stands out because it's become such an iconic record in hip hop that I have to just make sure everyone knows is Explosive on, Chronic 2001. It's like, that's just an iconic bass line that everybody knows, man. And it's like, not only were you there for all those moments, but your bass playing is incredible. I mean, now, there is a sound. That sound, is there a story behind that sound of that bass that you want to share?
I mean, it's interesting. So there was one bass I probably played on 90% of all the Dre records, and it was a pretty early prototype jazz bass that Roger Sadowsky made, and it had EMG active pickups. It was a 5-string bass that I actually bought off of the one and only John Patitucci. And so I had a 4-string bass that was great, but I was like, man, I need to get a 5-string just for that low B and those low notes. And John sold it to me, man, and he knew I was on a budget. He did me a solid and sold it to me dirt cheap. This was around the time John had been at LA staple, but was moving to New York, and his bass tech had a number of basses on him that he was trying to sell. So in any event, I bought that bass from John, and I want to say, man, I mean, for whatever reason, it just was magic. Dre heard that bass and instantly just fell in love with it. And I remember the early sessions, Dre would always say, man, make sure you bring that Sadowsky bass. And he always, he said, bring the Sadowsky. And so I would just make sure to bring it, man. Anything to make him happy and keep me hired for sessions. So that bass just, it worked. I knew how to get the sound that I wanted. Dre EQ'd it however way he wanted to EQ it and compress it, and it just made me play, a certain way off of his drum beats,
Yeah.
and it ended up being, I want to say the bulk of it was that. I also have an a Gibson EBO bass that had a really cool tone that I'd use occasionally on some stuff. But yeah, it's just one of those basses that changed my life in the sense that, man, if I didn't have that bass, who knows? I don't know how long I would have lasted with Dre. Like, I think that bass was a big ingredient in me getting those early sessions with him.
So yeah, that brings me to my next question. Well, and also let me just go back a little bit. So for all the new generation, I see a lot of new generation musicians, the whole spectrum, really going back now and studying what we were listening to when we were young, which is the electric band. A lot of people, I'm seeing a lot of these people that are just getting hip to this, and it's like a sound that's starting to permeate in certain communities, right? So to me, I just love connection. So just to think that the bass player from Chick Corea's electric band's bass, old bass, is on Explosive, it's just a blow up, man, of how the world works to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just an amazing carrying of an instrument and a tone that has been inspirational in two completely different genres, right? And I imagine you still have that bass somewhere special.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I keep that one close, and it's like a, an old suit, old glove, whatever. Just I know exactly, how to get the sounds I want out of it.
Right.
But yeah, and that was one of the cool things about Dre, is that he let me experiment. Bring in some pedals, bring in a guitar, bring in some keyboards, bring in a computer with some soft synths. Like,
Sure.
as I was discovering things, and I would bring it into his sessions, and if it worked, it was something that provided something for him. He'd keep it, and I feel like that's just kind of how my brain works. If I get a new pedal or a new keyboard, now if I'm working with someone, I set it up, and I can't tell you how many times it's like just that new thing provoked or inspired somebody in the room. And that's all I'm trying to do, is not only for myself, but trying to get a reaction from someone in the room. I don't do too much by myself, where it's just me staring at a computer. I'm like, I don't know. I got to have some, somebody else in the room to bounce off. Like, hey, how does this feel to you? What's this sound like? In order for me to feel motivated,
Sure. Yeah, it's almost like a band mentality. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a mutual,
100%.
Yeah, that vibe. I mean, so you spend so much time in the studio, right? And you've been, part of some of the most, I don't know, like you mentioned all those people, and there's a lot more. Some of the most innovative producer partnerships, like the producers that have done so many crazy things, some of the best ones in modern music. So when you're in the studio so long, and a lot of people know, records, man, it's like you're living with someone, during the course of a record.
Yeah.
What's the key to sustaining the long-term creative chemistry in the studio, especially when you're just, you're with each other day in, day out, and you have a goal? And it's not like a mandate per se, but there is a little bit of time and pressures in certain situations where you got to get something done. So how do you navigate that?
Wow, that's a great question, Trevor. I sort of in a I don't know if it's weird or whatnot, but I've been fortunate to have been married, for 28 years. And, my lovely wife, Trista, who you know very well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, and if anyone ever asked me, what's the success of my marriage? And it's like, I feel like it's our communication. It's me being able to listen and me being able to communicate, how I'm feeling and listen to how she's feeling. And I feel like making a record is just sort of like a small version of that, where you've got an artist or a band, and you got to just make sure you're constantly checking in and constantly listening or reading some of the social cues, because some artists don't verbalize it in a quick way or whatever. So sometimes it's just the way that they physically are reacting to something, or a look on their face or whatever.
Right.
Or some dude come right out and say what's wrong. But just making sure I'm constantly listening and picking up on social cues of like what's going on, how they're reacting to the process. Is it sounding the way that they want it? You know, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that to me is an essential part of the process, enabling me to make sure that they're feeling connected to what's going on, and I don't go like off the deep end on some tangent and then leave them behind. And the next thing I know, we've been spending 5 days chasing something that they're not even feeling. You know? So making sure that I'm constantly checking in is a huge part of the record making process for me, and that longevity from day one to the last note we record.
Well, that's very important, and I think that's a great thing that you just said, because a lot of times, you know, now especially with the advent of a lot of people that are just sitting in front of computers doing everything, I feel like sometimes that communication gets cut off. It's like, this is it, I'm sending it, you know, whatever, this is what I did, and if you like it, cool. If you don't, change something. You know what I mean? It's just different. Sometimes it's different, and I feel like the music has now reflected that, and I feel like, you know, I don't know what direction it's going, and that kind of leads me to the next question, because I'm going to always have this conversation going, because it's so new, which is with the rise of AI tools and new production technologies, what do you think producers have to protect at all costs to keep music human? You know what I'm saying? And where do you see the use for it, but where do you see it needs to be like, hold on, we need to, you know, because as you know, we just had our first #1, you know, country record that was 100% AI, you know, and I know Nashville doesn't like that. So
I know. I mean, I just feel like each individual that steps into a room, there's a uniqueness that it's up to us to allow or whatever we feel makes us unique shine through or be present. You know, some people have a lot of, you know, something that's unique to them, but maybe they're too shy to show it, or they only show a little part of it. But I feel like the great things happen is when each person steps into a room and is willing to like share what makes them unique, how they hear things, chord progressions, beats, rhythms, melodies, lyrics, all that stuff. Like when you get a bunch of people who are unique and they all bring all that stuff and they're willing to share it and communicate it and collaborate, that's the beauty of it, you know, where I feel like AI just sort of like gets it to like sort of this common denominator of prompts, and you just sort of end up with something that doesn't sound unique. It can sound good, it can sound realistic, but I just don't know if that's ever going to, you know, really penetrate someone. Like it might just be a cool first listen if a listener, the average Joe, just sort of checks it out. But in terms of like being able to really penetrate someone's soul and emotionally, I just don't know that that's going to happen. It's more just sort of background music and just something, you know, that can exist. But I feel like there's always going to be space for someone to be able to come in and be unique and hope that impacts an audience and a listener. I think AI is going to be able to do things that kind of approximate and get close or sounds like, you know, but it's never going to be able to like connect with the humanness that we all have and share.
Right. I feel that. I mean, that's a great take on it, because there is something about the emotion. You know, it's just, I mean, because it's based off things that someone has already done. So inherently, you know what I'm saying? Inherently, it's not a progressive thinker. It's it's taking averages basically of
it's a
things.
Copycat.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, you know, it has its,
averages,
I feel like, I think it'll really end up taking over, you know, commercial vibes. And I think it'll have its place, but I don't think it's ever going to replace, you know, humans making music. You know what I mean? It can be a tool, but, you know.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is when you have streaming services who are, you know, creating their own AI content and taking the space of actual songwriters
Crazy.
and artists. You know what I mean? So it's like when you got
crazy.
this pie chart, and so much of it is being, taken up by just fake music
Right.
in essence. I mean, that's really what's disheartening, because there's a lot of people who, are their residuals are being cut out and cut down, and how much money that they might be able to generate is being shrunken. That's where it's unfortunate and really disheartening. But in terms of like pure music, like I'm personally not worried about it, in the sense that I feel confident that there'll always be a space for quote unquote real music. But I think, I do feel like there are aspects of sort of maybe, and I'm still trying to figure out ways that it makes sense for me. I mean, I love things, where I don't know, I guess it's a form of AI, but where you can do stem splitting, and where you can kind of really go in and like find stuff, and like as long as you're giving people the proper credit, but just to be able to like find elements within a track and kind of go, oh wow, that's really cool, and just being honest with it. But to me, I've found some really great need and uses for that. I'm sure at some point down the road, it'd be interesting. I don't know that I would do this, but it'd be interesting if you could like, hey, here are 10 takes of a vocal, comp it, keeping it, I don't know, comp it, edit, vocal line it, whatever. I don't do a lot of music where that's necessary, but it'd be interesting to me to just sort of see what an AI vocal comp would do,
Right.
or just to kind of take a performance where they're not perfecting it, they're just looking for, here's 10 takes, get the ones that you feel, and just see what they do, and just kind of like, oh, actually, that's a pretty good comp. Maybe it saved me an hour or two of time.
You know what, man? If I'm being honest, I think we could do it if we had to, Mike. Right now, I think with a couple of software and a stream deck with some multitask, multitask buttons assigned, man, it might be like, hey, I'm going to lunch. Let me check out the vocal when I get back.
I mean, yeah, exactly. It'd be interesting to see what it does, how it hears it and what it computes. But it's interesting time, man. I mean, I'm always one to, like yourself, man. I've been actually always inspired by you and how forward thinking and how quickly you embrace new things. I'm always calling you, Trev, like, hey, what's going on with this? What you using for this or this or that? And you're always turning me on to stuff. So I try and be open-minded about it, but it's hard for me to believe that AI is ever going to replace, human emotion and really penetrate the soul in that way that music can.
Right. Well, I mean, since we're on that subject, it's like, you do so much. You kind of always mix, live with, with program stuff, and you have elements. So just on a gear side, is there anything like gear or hardware or software that's just stood out in the last couple of years or the last year or whatever, or some of your recent productions that's like, this is just the thing I have to have on everything now, even if it's processing or anything to that magnitude? Is there like something that stood out that has just become on everything?
I mean, I would say all of my rough mixes, demos, whatever, always have to have God Particle on it. Like, I feel
shout
like
out to Jason. Come on, Jason.
That one is like, it's a magic plugin, man.
It's
unbelievable. It's so musical, very minimal knobs and adjustments ever needed to be made. And it's just when you put it on and you hear it, it's like, man, this is what I was hoping it would sound like. And then you turn it off and realize how you had it sounding. You're just like, oh my gosh, man, this is magic. But I love, I mean, just like a lot of people, I love being able to have stuff that I can like lo-fi and make something sound like a sample within the track, So, whether you're doing something to a vocal or a drum or a piano or whatever, and just being able to pitch it, mangle it, and anything like that. I feel like there's a handful of plugins that have been doing that for a while, RC20 and whatnot. but I love being able to have things that just make stuff feel a little bit off kilter or dirty, um, but also mixed with things. I'm always trying to find the balance. Like if something's slow tempo, what's maybe a double time thing I can do to it? If something's sounding really clean, what's something I can do to dirty it up? If something's sounding too complicated, what are some simple notes I can find and weave through all these chords? Like I'm always trying to find opposites. It's something that I'm always trying to look for in things that I do, and it goes that way with drums, and it's like you can break it down to a lot of different things. I'm always just trying to find opposites and hope that gives sort of a balance, to the listener. But yeah, there's a lot of fun things out there. But yeah, anything that kind of makes something sound lo-fi, I'm always a fan. I'm always trying to listen to check out new plugins that get me there closer.
Right, that's crazy, man. Well, we're gonna wrap it up soon, man. But this one is very important because I've now heard a new term that I never heard before. And it was speaking to somebody recently, some younger, writers and producers, and they were like, "Yeah, man, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it pop. We're gonna do pop splits. You guys do pop splits or you do hip hop?" And I was like, "What in the heck are they talking about?" So, someone who writes and produces and plays in all these different areas, how do you navigate, ownership and splits, just to make sure your stuff is protected and respected? How do you navigate that? Because that's an awkward thing sometimes.
It's crazy. I mean, as you know, I live out here in Nashville, Tennessee, and out here, I feel like Nashville's like the hub of just incredible songwriters, and I feel like everyone out here just does equal splits. Like,
sure,
if there's 3 people in a room, it's going to be split equally. And I feel like that's becoming more and more the norm for a lot of people. But what ends up happening is like you write a song and then that artist takes it to a producer. Maybe I'm not producing it, someone else is producing it. And then they go, "Hey, well, we're cutting in these 2 producers, right, another 10% or 15%. And what I want to say is like, hey, that's cool, but that should come out. If it was me, another writer, and an artist, then that artist should be up for like, hey, cut them into your third. But why should me and the other 2 writers get, and it could get hairy or whatever. But at the end of the day, I try and just, learn who I'm dealing with. And if I see someone trying to take advantage of the situation, then I speak up. But in this day and age, I try and be amicable to whatever the artist is feeling is fair. But I also learn my lesson. If it comes back around again with that same artist and I didn't feel like the way the last one got treated, then I'll speak up and just say, hey, just so you know, like, I feel like moving forward, here's how we should handle it, and just set the table before we even write the song, and just say, hey, just, are you cool if we do it this way? And even if it goes to another, you bring in someone else to help write the lyrics, like, we're cool with that, but maybe that should come out of your third of whatever we finish today, and just kind of take a read. And if they're like, I don't feel comfortable with that, then see if they come with something else. But trying to explain to them why I think it's fair to do it a certain way. But I'd say most of the time I'm writing with the artist, and maybe there's a third writer in, and it just stays there. But it is happening more and more where a song that you wrote and you thought was done goes to a producer or goes to another writer, and then all of a sudden you're having to find another 20% of a song that you thought was already 100% done.
Right. Well, and it's funny because the distinct 2 differences of those things are, just like you said, the Nashville thing is basically what they consider, pop splits, which is just equal. And then, the non-pop, so I guess that would be hip hop and R&B splits, are, 50% for the music, 50% for the lyric or the top line, and anything vocal related. So, if you have 5 people a part of the song and one person that wrote a lyric, then it's like they're getting 50 and then the other 5 are splitting 10 each. It's just funny, and it's been going on for so long, that it's just like, oh man, I wish there was a universal way for this to happen, but it just is what it is. And the whole thing is you have to navigate it, because if it's the wrong time or the wrong thing, it could kill the session and kill the vibe of the music.
No,
you know what I mean?
It's so true. Yeah, you don't want to be, because you can come off seeming like, oh man, you're just, money hungry or whatever, trying to just get, But I think it's just a fair thing to bring up. Sometimes I would say for myself, I don't bring it up if I'm working with someone new. I don't really bring it up, but occasionally, like sometimes I'm writing with a band, right, and it's me and 5 other members of a band,
right,
and I'm doing the same amount of work that I might have done if it was just me and the lead singer of the band, right? but they split everything, and you kind of have to go, well, hey, I really want this cut, or I really want this relationship with this artist or this band. And that's just a pill you got to swallow. So that can change things too. But I try and just go in with an open mind, assume it's going to be equal splits. If at the end of the day it wasn't, and then that artist comes back around, then I bring it up then and kind of just try and make sure we all understand moving forward how best, what feels the most fair.
Sure. Well, man, it's been great. I'm gonna leave, and we're gonna end with this question because it's probably gonna be funny. You've been in the studio with so many people. What's one moment like funny or unbelievable or completely unexpected that you still can't believe happened?
Well, I mean, I think one story that always gets me that I tell people, and this is early, working with Dre, but one thing that I always found really funny is I'd be in a session with Dre, and maybe he had like a new artist that would come in, and I would literally be playing bass or playing a guitar part or playing keys, and the artist would come up to me saying, "Yo, Meg, can I put in a food order?" and I'm like, "What?" Like, they just assumed that I was the person that was like the go-to to put in their food order that they wanted. But I'm literally playing an instrument. I'm like, what makes you think I'm the person? I don't know. I guess I just looked the nerdiest and looked like the most, I don't know, like the intern at the studio. I don't know what the reason. That would happen all the time. It would happen all the time until eventually I got enough credits with Dre and people kind of like, oh, that's Mike Elizondo who did such and such and such and such. But even still, man, like there's a lot of times where I'd walk into a room, I'm playing the bass, and people thought I was the assistant engineer. And hey, no disrespect. I mean, assistant engineers are essential parts of the session. Sure. But a lot of times they're the ones that kind of help get the food order going.
Right.
And
right. And the runners, right. So, I mean,
runners,
there is that cycle. I mean, there at least there used to be for sure, that cycle and that mentorship and that whole apprenticeship that would happen. Mm-hmm. You hear Jimmy's story, Jimmy Iovine's story. A lot of people went through that thing where they were first at the runners. I mean, I know engineers, that even worked at Dre during the time I did that. When I first got there, they were runners, and now, one of them is like running a studio of a major, publishing company. So there's a cycle that happens. That's the beauty. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing when you can see someone come up and keep, I've been fortunate to work with some great engineers that did a great rough mix, and next thing you know, everyone's asking them to mix their records, and they, next thing you know, they're 100% mixing only. They're not tracking anymore, and I love it when that happens.
We have our mutual high school mate, Manny Marroquin, who's one of the GOATs. We got that whole Hamilton alumni with Abe Laboriel and Warren Campbell. And so many people that went to our school, man, and ended up staying with it, so John Diversa, you know what I'm saying? It's crazy. So crazy. Man. Well, Mike, of course, thank you so much for spending your time with us, man. I like people to really hear things from the horse's mouth. I mean, we could go on for hours, man, about.
Oh, there's so many things. Yeah, maybe we'll do a part 2 someday.
Yeah, maybe a part 2 about the early days. I don't know if you know, but one of our old band pictures is in the theme of my show. So, you know, you're
Oh,
there.
I did see it.
Yeah, you're there on every show.
Second generation.
Yeah,
I saw that.
It was awesome, man.
Wait, what was that show? Was the show we did out in the annex, or that one little?
I think so.
Show that we did.
We had our tuxes, and then the top one was when we did like the 20 years later at the Blue Whale, and then the bottom was the same thing of the, you know, back in high school, man.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Amazing.
But yeah, maybe we'll do a part 2, man. That's awesome. Well, and maybe we'll get John on, you know.
That'd be great, man. Definitely.
But thanks again, man. Once again, everybody, Mike Elizondo, the guy, you know, thank you for coming on the TrevBeats show, man.
All right, Trevor.
You know, I'll say this. I'll let the crowd simmer down. I'll say this. I have one of our buddies coming on too on a subsequent episode, which is Mark Batson. So, you know, we'll have
the professor.
The professor's coming on, man. I know the three of us have you know, made records together for years, but he's got a whole nother set of stories and ideas and energy, man. So I appreciate you for coming on, and you know, we'll have to do this again, bro. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much, Trevor.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. All right, everyone. Well, that does it for today's episode of the TrevBeats Show. Big shout out to Mike Elizondo for dropping so much wisdom for us today. If you didn't take notes, you better go back and watch it again, because that was like a masterclass, you know, from one of the great songwriters. Also, make sure you check out the links in the description and head on over to Splice. Check out my new pack, Boom Bap Drums. Now, before we get out of here, I got to tell you about next week's show, because it's definitely going to be special. We're deep diving into wellness and AI, you know, not just tech, but the energy behind the tech, the mindset, the discipline, the inner work that keeps you grounded. And joining me is someone who embodies all of that. Super producer, AI does not equal I am Source 7. You may know him formerly as 7 of Murder Inc. fame, but he was one of the architects behind some of the biggest records in the early 2000s. But today he's on a whole different frequency, spiritually, artistically, technologically. So this conversation is gonna challenge you, inspire you, and maybe even wake something up in you. So make sure you're locked in next Saturday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and as always, stay inspired, stay curious, and stay creating. I'm Trevor Lawrence Jr., and this is the TrevBeats Show. We out.
It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out.